Okay, so this is the next lesson, lesson four, on the United States Regents exam. And today we're going to talk about a new nation. All right, now after the Revolutionary War, America decides that, you know what, now that we have our own independence. Now, how are we going to govern ourselves? So they came up with this system of government, and they called it the Articles of Confederation, and it was the first form of government used by the U.S. after they got their independence from Great Britain. Now, the Articles of Confederation. A lot of people, the Americans anyway, the 13 colonies, they distrusted a strong central government, and here's the reason why. Remember, they came from Great Britain, right? They was owned by Great Britain. In Great Britain, there was a king and queen, and they didn't like the fact that there was one person that can just rule everything. So they did not want to have something called like this central government system. They didn't want that. They wanted people to have their own liberties. So what they did was they broke up the power and they divided among many groups, and those many groups were considered to be the states. So every state had its own individual power. So the 13 colonies turned into 13 states, and those 13 states had their own individual power. So here were the problems and weaknesses when it came to the Articles of Confederation. It was unsuccessful at solving many problems because most power remained with the state governments, right? The states had the authority to solve the problems throughout the whole country, but the thing is, states only focus on their own states. Congress depended on the states for the men, the money to support an army. So it's like, where they getting their army from? The states had to send them there. Remember, we're talking about Congress here. So that this national government, or what we call federal government, could not enforce any laws at all. Congress consistently overrode the president's vetoes. States had the power to collect taxes, coin money, and control trade. So the Congress at this in the Articles of Confederation, they didn't have a power to collect taxes. So let's say if the state owned money, or if the country owed money to a particular country, the central government will get money from the states or ask the states, hey, can you pay us so that way I can pay this country back? And the states refused. So that was a big problem. Now, there was some success with the Articles of Confederation in terms of there was a part that the Articles of Confederation was actually good, and it what it did was it provided a system of governing the Western territories and a process for admitting new states into the Union. This is actually a good thing of the Articles of Confederation. Excuse me. What it did essentially was say, all right, in the Western territories, like near the Mississippi River, this is how we're going to handle the Native Americans. This is how we're going to handle new states going to be joining the United States. So that portion of the Articles of Confederation was actually good. Now, because there were weaknesses and there were problems with this Articles of Confederation, a lot of the delegates at the top of the state, the delegates of each single state, like the 13 colonies, they all had to meet. And they met and they said, you know what, we need to change some stuff up. We need to revise this Articles of Confederation because obviously it's not a good thing. It's bad for our country. So major American delegates, those were the politicians, they all met in Philadelphia. So they wanted to revise or correct these weaknesses that the Articles of Confederation had. But it was primarily called because the central government needed more or additional power. So because the states had way too much power. And Shays' Rebellion is a great example of how weak the Articles of Confederation was. Because it convinced many Americans of the need for a stronger national government. Okay, it exposed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. It led to a call of the Constitutional Convention. Now, I know Shays' Rebellion. The regents don't really go into specifics about the Shays' Rebellion. You just need to know that the Shays' Rebellion was a significant reason or to prove that the Articles of Confederation was weak. But I will briefly describe Shays' Rebellion, so that way you get an idea of what Shays' Rebellion was. But Shay was a farmer, and he owed money to the bank for his farm, and and the bank decided that they was going to foreclose on his property, but it became part of the state. So they took all his property, his farm, and everything, and he decided that he was going to go to the Congress and ask him, can he get his land back? And Congress looked at him and said, well, talk to your state. And the state really just kind of like declined. So he went to other farmers who's going through the same situation as him, and they all was like protesting, and they had this big fight, and it was a mess. But it proved that the states had too much power, and the Congress could not do anything about it at all. So this is why they met at that convention to revise. So at this convention, they had and there was several debates, but they finally came up with they met got a compromise. And any time in history, believe it or not, there's always been debates. There's been debates since this country was born. There's been debates and issues. There's always going to be a right side and a left side. So there need to be some type of middle ground, some type of compromise. Now, this compromise here is settled disputes over the states that will be represented in the national legislature or the Congress. Essentially, this is what this was. Um, the the small states and the large states had issues. There were issues because the large states were saying that because we're a big state, we should have more people in Congress. Remember, Congress is the one who makes all of the laws, right? So the small states was like, that's not fair. Just because I'm a small state doesn't mean that I shouldn't have people to represent my state in making decisions for the country. Because think about it, right? So let's say that you a large state and there's a lot of people that's going to be representing your state, and you a small, and me being a small state, I have a small amount of people that's going to be representing me. So whenever there's like a new bill that needs to be passed that's going to be beneficial, whether it's to the country or to a large state or a small state, when they vote in when they vote for this thing, of course the large states will win every time because they have more people in Congress. So this was a big issue. So New Jersey came up with an idea. It was like New Jersey Compromise. There was a Virginia, because New Jersey was a small state, and New Jersey said, "Hey, we should be equally represented in Congress." And Virginia was like, "No, the larger the state, the better the state." Excuse me. So, New Jersey and Virginia was going at each other because they were small and big states. Well, so they came to a compromise when Connecticut offered this new thing. Connecticut said, "Hey, how about we make Congress into two bodies? We have the House of Representatives, and we can have the Senate. The Senate will be for every state that's inside the union. You have two members in the Senate. This is the reason why today the Senate is fixed numbers, only have 100 members. Whereas the House of Representatives is based on population. So the larger your state is based on population, you're going to have more people being represented in Congress. So today, this is the reason why you have the House of Representatives and you have the Senate. The Senate is a fixed number at 100, and the House of Representatives have well over 400 members because the states vary in size. That's the reason why there's a different split in Congress anyway. So, and I explained to you what the solution was, and they call this split when they have the House of Representatives and the Senate. They call this a bicameral legislator. Very important that you see this term, and you recognize it because you may see this later. Which is the two houses that write and vote on laws, right? House of Representatives and the Senate. Very important that you remember that. There's another issue discussed at this constitutional convention. Now it's a 3/5 compromise. And what this is essentially saying, the largest states were saying, hey, you know what? I'm large simply because I have a lot of population. And at the time, they were counting their slaves as part of their their population, and the small states responded by like, hey, that's not your population, that's your slave, that's like a tool, like a fork or a hammer. And the large states were saying, no, what are you talking about, these are people, blah, blah, blah. But they're not, slaves wasn't seen as people at this time, they were seen as labor. So they came to a compromise and said, okay, instead of, we're going to call every time for every, we're gonna call like the 3/5 compromise. Like the one person is gonna be considered 3/5 of a person, in a sense, of a slave. So this is how they came up with this compromise, the 3/5 compromise about slaves and being counted as the population. Because when you talk about the large state, you talk about terms of population, not excuse me, not so much as the land mass and how much square mile it is. It's about how many people live there.